All right, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well. We're here live for the Human Geography Review Session number 3. So I hope things are going well for you guys. Hope the school year has gotten off to a good start. I would imagine that everybody now is in school. I know some parts of the country didn't start until maybe maybe a week or so ago. So I hope the school year started off well. Hope you guys are getting acclimated to the course pretty well. So the last couple of weeks we've talked about some different principles that are kind of foundational to the course. Talked about the idea of spatial analysis and spatial perspective, which really that's all human geography is dealing with. And then of course we talked about the different types of maps which are going to help you create spatial perspective and spatial awareness. Last time talked about the different types of regions, and so that's going to kind of segue into the next conversation that I want to have, which is going to be vocabulary. And so this particular session is going to be mostly about just some general things that you can do to help you out with the course. So first thing I want to talk about is study habits. This is an AP course for a lot of people. It's freshmen taking the course. So developing good study habits is going to be crucial to you in order to not only do well in the course, but also do well in the AP exam later on in the year. And I would assume, since you're an AP student, you'd like to do well, not only in the course, but also on the exam. And so it's really important that you go ahead and start developing good study habits to get ready for all the things you got coming up this year. So with that, the human geography course is really different from all of the other social studies courses and AP courses and AP history courses in general, in that it's more about the concepts that are in the course as opposed to some of the specific content. Now, of course, specific content is going to be important, but unless you can understand the concepts, then it's going to be very difficult for you to be successful in the course. Geography is not really about memorizing different names and dates and locations and whatnot. It's more about understanding the concepts that are within the course, and then how do those different concepts apply to various situations. I often describe it to my students. It's more like a math class, or it's more like a science class, where you learn a principle in math. So say you're doing addition. Your teacher doesn't necessarily teach you all the answers to all of the potential math problems that come up. Your teacher teaches you how to add. She teaches you the principles behind addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, so forth and so on. And then regardless of the equation that you're given, you should be able to solve the problem. So it's the same thing with human geography. We learn more about principles and ideas, and then you should be able to take that principle and idea and apply it to a variety of different circumstances that occur throughout the world. Now, your teacher will probably go through with you some specific circumstances that illustrate the concept, and there are certainly circumstances that the course, I guess in the course outline it's there, but want you to go over, but it's not so much about remembering or memorizing each of those different circumstances. So really make sure that you understand the concept. So the way that you can do that is make sure that you're really familiar with vocabulary. And so whatever textbook you're using, you should have a set of vocabulary. So make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with that. Make sure you're going over that. And again, it's not just understanding the vocabulary itself. Make sure that you understand the concept of the vocabulary and the way that it applies to a variety of different circumstances. So you should do things like have the definition, and then you need to be able to give several examples of that particular thing. Now, obviously, it's not going to work for all of the terms because, if you get a term, and this happened to my students last year, they'd say things like, well, that is the example. Well, maybe. It just really depends on the case, so you have to make sure that you're being careful with that. So that's the first thing, is just developing good study habits, and one of the best ways to do that for human geography is make sure that you are familiar with the vocabulary. The second thing I want to talk to you about is the FRQs. The FRQs are the free response questions, or the essay type that are in human geography. They're a lot different from any of the other types of writing in the social studies, with the exception of maybe psychology. Psychology is very similar in that you're not given points based upon how you write. So within the histories, you get a point for your thesis, and you get a point for outside information, those other kinds of things. In human geography, you have to know the content. So as I was mentioning earlier, I was saying that it's mostly about concepts. Well, you have to know the content also, and that's what I think makes the question, the writing portion of human geography maybe a little bit more difficult. Because if you get a question and you don't know the content, then you're really just kind of in a lot of trouble there, and so it's going to be very difficult to make to earn points as a part of the test. So when you're writing the FRQs, just remember you have to know content. The other thing is let's say you get a question, you're not terribly familiar with it, and you don't feel 100% confident, you still got to write. The only way for you to earn points is if you're going to write. And so even if you're not 100% certain, do the best you can, write something down that sounds close to right, and then just, hope, I don't know about hope and pray, but, just give it your best shot. If you don't write anything, it's impossible to get any points, and it's always better to get at least a couple of points than it is to get 0 points. On the AP exam, generally the essays are going to run to about 7 points, okay? And so typically each thing that you're asked to do is 1 point. So let's say you're asked to define a term. That would be 1 point. If you are asked to describe, or you're asked to identify and explain, so typically the identification part would be 1 point, and then the explanation part would be another point. So as you look through the question, you can kind of guess how many points are available there, and you can kind of, depending on how well you answer the question, you can know for yourself about where you should fall in terms of the number of points that you get. The other thing that's really important is when you look at the question, oftentimes it's going to be structured. There will be an A part. You see that? A. There will be a B part, and then there will be a C part. For the sake of organization and for the sake of whoever, whether it's your teacher scoring it or whether it's someone in the human geography exam grading and scoring it, answer it in that fashion, okay? If it's an ABC, think of it in terms of like 3 short answer questions. And so whatever A is asking me, I answer A. Whatever B is asking me, I answer B. Now, a lot of times, B might build on A, but you're not necessarily addressing specifically the things that are in A. In some cases, it'll be A and B are 2 completely separate questions and don't really relate to each other. And then in C, you've got to kind of bring it all back together. Some teachers make a big deal out of emphasizing some of the different verbiage that's used in the questions. I really don't. Mostly because I try to make sure that kids don't get overwhelmed with the information that's coming at them. So just address the terms as they come. If I ask you to identify something, all that means is you need to name something. You need to name a place. You need to name a thing. Okay, just identify. If I ask you to identify and explain, so identify. Number one, make sure you've identified it, and then explain how that thing relates to whatever the question is asking. Okay, and so again, I wouldn't necessarily get too wrapped up in. I wouldn't necessarily get too wrapped up in the different verbiage that's used for the question. Just make sure that you address it. I think maybe one of the big mistakes is a lot of students think it's a lot more complicated than it is, and so they try to maybe overthink it. They overwrite it. I always tell my students, just answer the dumb question. You don't need to give me a narrative on whatever the question is. Just answer the question. It's really interesting when you're scoring the essays. A lot of times, if a student really knows the topic, they address the topic in maybe let's say each ABC part like 3 sentences, and it doesn't even fill up a whole page, and they get a perfect score, close to a perfect score. And the students who don't know a whole lot, they write a bunch, hoping that they're going to hit it somewhere. And so you have instances, and this is really common, where a student who gets close to a perfect score has written maybe less than a page. Student who maybe gets 1.0 points has written like a page and a half. So just because you write more does not necessarily mean that your writing is going to be better, so keep that in mind. So there you have it, guys. Just a couple of things to keep in mind as you're going throughout the year, just a couple of hints on study habits. Writing FRQs, I imagine you guys getting started out, maybe you haven't written any yet. Maybe you're going to start writing them here in the near future. Just a couple of ideas to keep in mind. So I appreciate you guys watching. Hope you guys are having a great year so far. And as always, hope to see you next time.